The rehearsal hall was filled with soft music, the clinking of glasses, and the hum of guests catching up with one another. Fairy lights twinkled along the tall windows, and the scent of roses decorated the air. It was supposed to be one of the happiest evenings of Margaret Harper's life. Her only son Daniel was about to marry the woman he loved. Margaret had dressed simply in a navy blue dress that had been in her wardrobe for years. She wore no flashy jewelry, only her late husband's wedding band on her finger. She had always believed her presence was enough, and she never liked showing off. But not everyone saw her that way. Daniel's fiancée, Olivia Grant, came from a wealthy family. She had grown up in mansions, spent summers abroad, and wore dresses that cost more than Margaret's entire monthly income when she was still teaching schoolchildren. Olivia carried herself with the air of someone who thought money decided a person's worth. She never said it directly, but the little smirks, the raised brows, and the whispered comments had already told Margaret that Olivia did not see her as part of the new family. Still, Margaret tried her best to stay quiet and not cause trouble. She told herself, "If my son loves her, then I must accept her." As the rehearsal began, everyone found their seats near the front. Margaret quietly chose a chair 2 rows from the stage, close enough to see everything. She smiled warmly at the bridesmaids, who were practicing their walk. She even waved at Olivia's parents, though they barely acknowledged her. She thought nothing of it and folded her hands in her lap. Then Olivia appeared. Her heels clicked against the polished floor as she approached, her silk gown swaying around her. She had a cold smile fixed on her lips, the kind that didn't reach her eyes. Standing in front of Margaret, she tilted her head slightly and said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear, "I think you're in the wrong seat." Margaret blinked, confused. This seat was empty. "I thought." Olivia didn't let her finish. She leaned down, her voice sharp, dripping with disdain. "Useless people don't sit here. Go find a place in the back." Gasps came from a few guests, followed by nervous laughter. Some people covered their mouths, while others watched like it was theater. Daniel, who was across the hall talking to the wedding planner, froze. His eyes darted to his mother, then to Olivia. But instead of speaking up, he hesitated. His shoulders tensed, and he said nothing. Before Margaret could rise, Olivia yanked the chair back with one swift pull. Margaret lost her balance. Her knees buckled, and she stumbled straight to the floor. Her palms hit the cold wood, and her purse spilled open. A few coins rolled across the floor, clinking loudly, while a packet of tissues slid under another table. The laughter grew louder now. Guests chuckled, some whispering, "Did you see that?" One groomsman actually clapped his hands and said, "Good one," as if it had been a joke performed on purpose. Margaret's face flushed crimson. At her age, falling was not only humiliating but painful. Her wrist throbbed from catching herself. She looked up slowly, her lips trembling, not from anger but from the sting of humiliation. Olivia stood above her, arms crossed, smiling like she had just proven something. "You belong on the floor," Olivia announced in a voice that carried across the hall. The crowd laughed again. Even the pianist, who had been playing soft background notes, stumbled on a few keys as the noise disrupted his focus. Margaret's heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to disappear. She had raised her son with dignity, taught him the value of hard work, given him every bit of her strength after his father died. And now, in front of strangers, she was being treated like nothing. Daniel finally took a step forward, but Olivia shot him a warning glance. He froze again. His hands balled into fists, but his lips stayed shut. The silence from her son cut Margaret deeper than Olivia's words ever could. Margaret tried to stand, her knees shaky, but her chair had been taken away. She pressed her hands against the floor to lift herself up. Her pride screamed inside her, "Don't cry, not in front of them." Not in front of her. But her body felt heavy, her throat tight. Whispers circled the hall. Did she really call her useless? Why would she sit there anyway? "I heard she doesn't even have money." Margaret's ears burned. Every word was another knife. She finally managed to get on one knee, clutching her purse, when the sound of the piano suddenly stopped. The silence fell heavy across the room. The pianist, an older man with silver hair, stood up from his bench. His eyes were wide, staring directly at Margaret. His voice, filled with surprise, broke the hush. "Ma'am, is that you?" The laughter died instantly. Guests turned their heads toward him, confused. Margaret froze, her heart skipping a beat. No one understood why the pianist was looking at her with such respect. Olivia frowned, suddenly uncertain. Daniel blinked, his mouth half open. The hall that had been filled with laughter seconds earlier now echoed with silence, broken only by the pianist's trembling voice. "Are you the owner of this place?" The words hung in the air like thunder. "Are you the owner of this place?" the pianist asked again, his voice trembling with disbelief. Everyone froze. Laughter that had filled the room seconds before vanished into silence. The bridesmaids stopped mid-step. The groomsmen who had been snickering stared wide-eyed at Margaret. Even the waiters carrying trays paused, afraid to move. Margaret stood there, her hands gripping her purse, still half kneeling from her fall. Her cheeks burned, but her eyes lifted slowly toward the man at the piano. Mr. Collins. She recognized him now. He had been here for years, always playing during rehearsals and events. She remembered the day she had signed the papers to save this hall from being closed forever. He had been there too, standing in the corner with relief in his eyes when the investors backed out, and she quietly stepped in. Olivia's smug smile faltered. "What are you talking about?" she snapped, her voice louder than before, trying to cover her nerves. "She's just a guest." But Mr. Collins didn't look at Olivia. His eyes stayed on Margaret, full of respect. You are Mrs. Harper, aren't you? The woman who bought this building when no one else would? The one who saved all of our jobs." A ripple of shock went through the guests. Margaret's lips parted, but no sound came out. She hadn't wanted anyone to know. When she purchased the hall years ago, she had done it quietly, under her small company's name, never attaching her personal identity to it. She had wanted it to be a gift to the community, a safe place for music and weddings and life. She had never told Daniel either. She had kept her wealth hidden, always afraid it might change the way people treated her. But now the truth was spilling out. "Wait, she owns this?" someone whispered. Another voice answered, but Olivia said she was poor. The room began buzzing with confusion. People turned their heads back and forth between Margaret and Olivia. Margaret finally straightened her back, though her knees still ached from the fall. She smoothed her dress with slow hands and said softly, "Yes, I am the owner." Gasps filled the hall. A bridesmaid dropped her bouquet. The wedding planner's pen slipped from her hand and clattered against the clipboard. Even Daniel's mouth opened in shock, his eyes darting from his mother to Olivia. Olivia's face drained of color. She took a step back, her confidence slipping. "No, that can't be true," she said, shaking her head. "She lives in a small house. She dresses like this. She doesn't even." Her words stumbled into silence. The pianist placed a trembling hand over his heart. "Mrs. Harper, we never forgot. You saved this hall. Without you, none of us would be here." Margaret looked around the room. All the eyes that had laughed at her a moment ago were now wide, filled with shame. The same mouths that had whispered cruel things were now silent. She could feel the shift in the air, the weight of respect slowly pressing back against the cruelty she had endured. Daniel finally found his voice. "Mom, is this true?" Margaret met his gaze. His eyes looked so much like his father's, full of confusion and regret. She gave a small nod. "Yes, Daniel. I bought this hall years ago. I wanted it to be my gift to the town. And tonight, my gift to you." Her words cut deeper than any shout could have. Daniel's chest rose and fell quickly, his face red. He had stood frozen when his mother was humiliated, and now the truth burned him with guilt. Guests murmured louder now, shaking their heads at Olivia. "How could she say those things?" one whispered. "Calling her useless when she owns the place?" Olivia's hands trembled. She tried to laugh, a weak sound that fooled no one. "It was just a joke," she said quickly. "I didn't mean it like that. I was only teasing." No one believed her. The silence that followed was heavier than any laughter before it. Margaret didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She simply walked over to her chair, the one Olivia had yanked away, and pulled it back into its place. Her hands were steady. She sat down gracefully, lifting her chin. The wedding planner, who had been frozen the entire time, finally stepped forward. She cleared her throat nervously. "Mrs. Harper, I have the paperwork here. The contracts. Yes, all of this is under your company's name. You are indeed the sole owner." The final confirmation crushed Olivia's last defense. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She looked around desperately for support, but all she saw were disappointed faces, eyes filled with disgust. Mr. Collins, the pianist, gave a small bow before sitting back down at his instrument. His hands hovered over the keys, waiting. But no one moved. No one spoke. The air was too heavy. Margaret folded her hands calmly in her lap. Inside, her heart was still pounding, but on the outside she was composed. She had lived through worse storms in her life. She had buried her husband, worked 2 jobs to raise Daniel, and faced years of quiet sacrifice. This humiliation was just another moment to endure. But this time, she would not stay silent. She turned her head slightly, her voice steady and clear. Respect cannot be demanded with money or clothes. It is given when it is earned. The words echoed through the hall. Daniel lowered his head. Olivia stood frozen, her face pale, her hands shaking. The guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their earlier laughter now a stain none of them could wash away. The evening had begun as Olivia's stage to shine, but in one sentence, in one reveal, Margaret had taken back the power she never wanted in the first place. And yet, the story was far from over. Because this was only the beginning. No one moved. You could hear the air conditioner hum. Margaret sat with her hands folded, back straight, eyes calm. Olivia stood a few steps away, pale and shaking. Daniel looked lost, as if he had just woken up inside the wrong life. The wedding planner finally found her voice. "Mrs. Harper, would you like us to continue the rehearsal?" Her words were careful, almost a whisper. Margaret's gaze drifted toward the balcony where the sound booth Saturday. "Before we continue," she said softly, "can we clear one thing?" She turned to the floor manager. "You have cameras here, yes?" The manager nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Lobby, aisle, seating, stage corners." "Please," Margaret said, still gentle. "Show the last 15 minutes by the front rows." She did not raise her voice. She did not accuse anyone. She just asked for the truth to be seen. The manager hesitated only a second before hurrying off. 2 techs climbed the stairs to the booth. The pianist rested his hands on the keys but did not play. The projector screen lowered from the ceiling with a soft motor sound. Guests shifted in their chairs, suddenly aware of their own faces, their own laughter, the things they had just done. Olivia tried to laugh again, but it came out thin. "We don't need to make this dramatic," she said, glancing at people for support and finding none. Really, it was a misunderstanding. Daniel's breath came fast. He took a step toward her. "Olivia, did you pull my mother's chair?" His voice was not angry. It was small and afraid. She kept her eyes on the screen instead of him. "This is ridiculous." The lights dimmed. The screen flickered. A top-down view appeared. The first rows, the aisle, the spot where Margaret had been sitting. A time stamp ticked in the corner. The room watched itself. They saw Olivia glide into frame, lips tight. They saw her lean over Margaret, hands slicing the air as she pointed toward the back. They saw her fingers hook around the chair back. Then one hard pull. The chair slid. Margaret's body pitched forward. A bridesmaid's hand flew to her mouth in the background. A groomsman smirked. A few people turned away. No sound. No commentary. Just the truth in bright light. Someone in the audience let out a low "oh." The tech rewound and played it again, slower this time. You could see more. The way Olivia's face sharpened just before she pulled. The way she looked to the side to make sure people were watching. Intent. Not clumsy. Not a joke. Intent. "Stop there," Margaret said. The frame froze on Olivia's hand gripping the chair. The manager looked over the balcony rail. "We also have a hall message log," he called down. "Our staff uses a group chat during events." "Miss Grant," he swallowed. "Miss Grant sent an instruction 5 minutes before this, to move the older woman to the back, make it look like a seating mistake." Olivia spun toward him. "That is private. It's the work channel," he replied, voice steady. "And I'm responsible for what happens to guests in this hall." He held up a tablet. A few closest guests saw the text and went still. The planner looked sick. Daniel closed his eyes as if the light hurt him. When he opened them, they shone with shame. He didn't look at Olivia. He looked at his mother. "Mom, I should have helped you." I froze. His voice broke. "I'm sorry." Margaret did not make him crawl for it. She simply nodded once. "I hear you." Olivia's chest rose and fell fast. "Everybody is ganging up on me," she said, voice shaking now. "Daniel, say something." Daniel did say something, but not to defend her. "Why would you do that to my mother?" Olivia's answer came too fast. "Because she embarrasses you. Look at her dress. Look at how she—" "Stop," Daniel said, a single word that landed like a door closing. Silence again. The screen went black and rolled up into the ceiling. The lights rose, but the room felt darker somehow, like a storm had passed and left a cold wind behind. Margaret lifted her purse from the floor and set it on her lap. She opened it and took out a long white envelope sealed with a small gold sticker. On the front, in her careful handwriting, for D&O. She held it, weighing it in her hands as if deciding the worth of paper, of promises, of people. This, she said, was my wedding gift. She did not wave it around. She just spoke to the room, to her son, to the young woman who wanted the front row so badly. It contains a letter. In the letter I confirm that I paid for the entire wedding. And I plan to add the deed to a small house as your first home. She looked up. I thought tonight would be about joy. A sound went through the room, somewhere between a collective breath and a gasp. The groomsmen who had clapped earlier stared at the floor now. A bridesmaid wiped a tear, then looked ashamed of herself. Margaret placed the envelope on the piano lid. The gold sticker caught the light. Her hand stayed there a moment, then slid it back toward her. She tucked it carefully into her purse and closed the clasp with a soft click. Respect comes first, she said. Gifts come after. Olivia's voice fell flat. You're punishing me because I made one small mistake. One small mistake is a spilled drink, Margaret replied, still calm. One small mistake is stepping on someone's foot. This was a choice. The manager cleared his throat and addressed the room. On behalf of the staff, I want to apologize to Mrs. Harper for not intervening sooner. He bowed his head to Margaret, then to Daniel. We failed to protect a guest from humiliation. Margaret shook her head gently. You stopped when asked. That's enough tonight. She stood, slow and steady, and the hall rose with her without thinking, old manners waking up inside them. Even the pianist stood. The only person still seated was Olivia, as if standing might draw lightning. Daniel walked to his mother and offered his arm. She took it. The small, simple act met the roar of everything that had just happened. It was not loud, but it was real. They stepped into the aisle. Margaret paused and turned back to the guests. We will take a short break, she said. For air. For thought. It was not a threat. It was a boundary set with soft hands and iron inside. On their way out, they passed Mr. Collins. He whispered, "Thank you for saving this hall," and his eyes shone. Margaret pressed his hand and nodded. In the lobby, away from the crowd, Daniel finally spoke in a full voice. I was wrong, he said. I thought staying quiet would keep the peace. It only fed the cruelty. He blinked hard. How long have you been helping me without telling me? Margaret touched his cheek like he was 6 again. Long enough, she said. A mother's work is quiet. He swallowed. What do we do now? Tell the truth, she answered. Then choose. Behind them, the hall doors remained closed. Inside, the guests sat with their shame and the image of a hand on a chair refusing to fade. Olivia stared at those doors too, every muscle tight, mind racing for exits that no longer existed. In her chest, pride rattled against fear. She reached for her phone, then let it fall back into her lap. No message could fix this. The pianist began to play again, soft and slow, a melody that sounded like apology in rain. The notes drifted through the crack of the door and met Margaret's back like a blessing. This night had started with laughter at a fallen woman. It now held breath for what would come next. The rehearsal could resume at any time. The wedding could still happen. But not as it was. Not with a lie sitting where love should be. Margaret took one steady breath and turned to her son. When you walk back in, she said, walk in as a man. And Daniel nodded. Because he knew the next step would not be about music or flowers or rings. It would be about the kind of home he wanted to build, and who he would invite to sit in the front row of it. The rehearsal had stopped being a rehearsal. It had turned into a courtroom, and every guest in that hall was both witness and judge. The truth had already been shown on the screen. The text message had been read. The envelope with Margaret's gift had been pulled back into her purse. Now, all that remained was the choice that no one could avoid. The pianist's soft melody filled the silence. People shifted in their seats, waiting. No one dared speak first. Olivia finally broke the quiet. She rose from her chair, her voice trembling but desperate. This is insane. You're all acting like I'm some kind of monster. I was just trying to keep order. Daniel, she turned to him, her eyes pleading now, not sharp. Daniel, tell them. You know I didn't mean it like that. You know I've only wanted what's best for us. Daniel stood in the aisle, his mother's hand on his arm. He looked down at Olivia, then at the guests. His lips parted, but for a long moment, no words came out. The weight of his silence earlier still hung heavy on him. Everyone had seen him freeze when his mother was humiliated. And everyone was watching to see if he would freeze again. Finally, he spoke. His voice was hoarse but steady. You called my mother useless. Olivia's mouth opened, but he didn't let her answer. He stepped forward, each word louder than the last. You pulled her chair. You laughed when she fell. And when the truth came out, you lied again. How can I marry someone who treats my mother like that? Gasps broke through the crowd. Olivia's face twisted, caught between rage and fear. So what, you're choosing her over me? Your whole life, she's controlled you. Margaret's calm voice cut through, quiet but powerful. I never controlled him. I only gave him everything I had. Daniel turned to his mother, his eyes wet. And I let you be humiliated in front of everyone. I'm sorry, Mom. I thought staying silent would keep peace, but silence only gave cruelty more power. Margaret touched his hand. You see it now. That's enough. But Daniel shook his head. No, not enough. Tonight I choose. He turned fully to Olivia. His face was pale, but his voice no longer shook. If you can't respect my mother, there will be no wedding. The words struck the hall like a hammer. Some guests covered their mouths. Others nodded in approval. Olivia staggered back, clutching her dress. You can't be serious. You'll throw away everything for her? For this old woman. Her words died when Daniel raised his hand. Don't call her that. His voice cracked with anger, real anger this time. She worked 2 jobs after my father died. She kept food on our table when there was nothing. She's the reason I even got to college. And when my startup nearly collapsed last year, she was the silent investor who saved it. You thought it was luck. It was her. Murmurs swept through the room. Guests turned wide-eyed toward Margaret, realizing she had been the invisible hand not only behind the hall, but behind her son's success. Olivia's face drained of blood. Her knees trembled. She gave you money? Without telling you. Daniel's voice softened now, but it carried even stronger. She gave me everything without asking for credit. That's the difference between her and you. She gives quietly. You take loudly. Olivia stumbled a step forward, reaching for him. Daniel, please. Think of how it looks. Think of the families. The guests. You can't humiliate me like this. Margaret rose slowly from her chair. She wasn't tall, but in that moment she seemed to fill the hall. Her voice was calm, firm, and final. No one humiliated you, Olivia. You did that yourself. Silence followed, the kind that comes before something breaks. Daniel took a deep breath. His eyes were glassy, his voice thick with pain. The wedding is postponed. He turned to the planner. Please cancel tomorrow's ceremony. The planner, pale and shaken, nodded slowly. Yes, of course. Olivia gasped. No, you can't, Daniel, listen. But he was already walking toward his mother. He placed his arm around her shoulders, guiding her toward the aisle. Come, Mom. You don't belong in the back. You never did. The hall erupted, not in laughter this time, but in murmurs of respect. Some guests even stood as Margaret passed, their eyes lowered in shame for how they had joined the cruelty before. Olivia collapsed into a chair, her sobs echoing against the tall ceilings. No one comforted her. Not even her own parents. They sat stiff and silent, their faces like stone. At the door, Margaret paused. She turned back once, her voice clear enough for all to hear. Remember this night. Not because of money or power or shame. Remember it because respect is the only wealth that lasts. Then she stepped outside with Daniel. The pianist began to play again, his fingers moving gently over the keys. The song was slow, filled with sorrow and hope all at once. Guests remained seated, reflecting on what they had seen, some wiping tears, others staring at their shoes. Inside, Olivia sat alone in the front row, the very seat she had stolen from Margaret. Her laughter was gone. Only silence answered her now. Outside, under the glow of the streetlights, Margaret held her son's arm as they walked to her car. For the first time in years, Daniel felt small again, like a boy leaning on his mother's strength. Mom, he whispered, voice cracking. Thank you for everything. Margaret smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. It's time you stand on your own, Daniel. But remember, always stand on the side of respect. The night air was cool. The hall behind them hummed with quiet music. And though the wedding had ended before it began, Margaret knew something more important had been saved, her son's soul. And that was worth far more than any ceremony.